Hello and welcome. My name is Tom Spice and this video should hopefully serve as a bit of an overview for a project that I have been completing as part of my final major project for my Masters in Sound Arts at Bath Spa. Just to contextualise the project a little bit before we get into the meat and bones of the whole thing. This project was pretty ambitious for me. It's quite a large project. But I wanted to aim at creating a virtual venue experience or a virtual event space experience using game engines, modern game engines, specifically Unreal Engine 5 and real-time rendering engines, as well as bringing in the idea of spatial sound and binaural audio, ambisonic audio. Unreal Engine is being used for many more things these days. It's being used in a lot of, obviously in games, but it's being used a lot in film and TV for virtual production workflows, and it has been used in music, particularly by artists, or notably by artists such as Childish Gambino, who've used it for like live real-time rendered visuals that have been projection mapped onto domes and half domes and stuff like that. It's also been used to a large extent to pre-visualize events and event spaces. My goal here was to think about trying to create a space that could be run by technicians who are used to running normal events using technology that they're used to using. Now, Unreal has DMX built into it, or at least it has from the latest few versions. And that's an incredibly useful protocol, on the industry standard protocol, to control lighting and other stage-based effects, live event effects. So in this case, I'm using Camsys Magic Cue software, which is free to use in demo mode, and I'm sending DMX over the ArtNet protocol into Unreal to control a lighting rig of my own design. The lights in the space are designed based on real world lights, so they should, in theory, react the same way, which can mean that we can design something in here and bring it back out into the real world, and it should work in exactly the same way. I also wanted to make sure that the audio itself, as I said, would be spatial. It would sound as if it's in the space. So the idea would be that a mixer could come in and maybe mix on headphones or on a set of speakers using a desk that they're familiar with, and then we can spatialize that. So while the spatial element of the sound isn't necessarily like the spatial audio demos that have been floating around, there's not a huge amount whizzing around. The idea was to keep it as natural sounding as possible. So it should sound like it's in the space. It should sound like speakers in the space, which I think I've achieved to a large extent. So with that being said, we will jump into the video itself, into the engine. But before we do, a couple of housekeeping points. This is not going to be an in-depth tutorial of every element that I've created here. It'll be a detailed overview, but it's not going to be a tutorial. There's too many layers to this for me to cover in a single video. But hopefully this will give you a good idea, a detailed overview of the technical aspects and the technical execution of this project. If you're not already, do put a pair of headphones on, as I've been saying this entire time, and as it said at the beginning of the video, this will contain spatial audio elements in a binaural format. So you want to be wearing headphones so you can get the full effect as I move a character around the space, and you can hear that sound shift as we rotate and we walk around. And yeah, I think that's about it, really. So we'll jump in, we'll see where we're at, and we'll start thinking about how this entire thing is working and talking about what's going on here. So let's jump over to Unreal. And yep, we are in Unreal. Happy days. So this is the Unreal editor, and if I bring up Magic Cue here, we can get our first example of the lights being controlled by an external piece of software or by DMX. By turning on the house lights. So let's just minimize that and get that out of the way. So let's have a little bit of a look around the venue space. So as you can see, it's a warehouse styled venue. Need to stop clipping through the walls, silly old me. But it's a warehouse styled venue with a large truss structure in the center of the space. And if we just fly around here, there's some lights down here also on truss. And if we kind of keep moving around, you can see there's tons and tons of lights. So all of these kind of little light bulb signs here, they're all lights. We have a mixture of moving lights that you will see on many, many festival stages and in live events in general. And then we have a lot of strip lights down here. So if you've not seen the original video, go and have a look. I say the original video, the sizzle reel. If you've not seen the sizzle reel, go and have a look. It's all based around this central truss structure, as I say, but at the end of the room, there is a big stage that we're not using for the demo that you've seen. So at the moment, this isn't lit, but the kind of idea is, like, the long-term goal of this is that we can start getting artists actually playing on this stage and performing within this virtual event space. Okay, so I think the best thing to start off with is maybe just a quick demo with a character in the space, and then I'll kind of talk through the individual elements while the game is playing, and we can have a bit of a think about where that lives and how that's working. So I'm going to open this in a new window. Hopefully this will work. Nothing's crashing here. Good, that's good. So here's my little Unreal character. It's a little bit laggy, but hopefully it'll be fine. So here's my Unreal, my third person character. And we can walk this character around the space as we have already done. Lovely jubbly. So the elements that I brought in here, as I was saying, is lighting, a bit of spatial sound, and there's some projection mapping onto the floor as well, which you'll see when I click play. The visuals for this projection were generated in Max MSP using the track that plays in the demo. So it's reactive, it's audio reactive to the track. And then in each section there's two projectors projecting diagonally opposite each other, so the abstract shapes make even cooler abstract shapes by interacting with each other. Another thing to note is that I used that video as a source for the lighting, so I brought that video into CamSys, and by doing so I was able to pixel map that video onto the strip lights around the side so that they react in time and in a similar way to the projection on the floor, whilst mixing in other lighting effects on top of that. If I bring up CamSys, we can have a look here and see how this is going to work. So the workflow for this is that I controlled all of the lighting in real time live for the actual recording that ended up being in the demo video. And then I recorded that into Unreal as DMX'd keyframes so that I could play it back and shoot that with multiple cameras. But it's worth noting that everything was programmed and recorded, programmed and controlled in real time with CamSys Magic Key. So if I turn off my house lights here, I can start controlling these lights. So if I bring up my Sharpies. So Sharpies are a brand of moving light by a company called Clay Packy. And this is probably a good time to note that every light in this scene is a virtual representation or a virtual adaptation of a real world light. So the moving lights are Clay Packy Sharpies, and the strip lights are actually just some basic cheap Chauvet DJ pixel bars. That's all to say that they should, in theory, react in the same way as their real world counterpart, which means that I can record this DMX information, design my show in Unreal, record it all as keyframes, and then output that as DMX again to a real world lighting rig that is set up and addressed in the same way as the rig here. So let's start having a look at how this works in principle. So I've got my Sharpies here, and if I click locate, those Sharpies wake up. From here, I can do everything that you would expect to be able to do with a real world light. So I can change my gobos, change the shape of the light itself and how it reacts. I can also change my colours. I can make them just about any colour that I want to make them. I can odd even my colours, so I can have red and, I don't know, let's say blue. And you can see that all of those lights in the space have started to react in the way that we want them to. Okay. Now, not only can I do intensity and colour, I can also do movement. So if I want the lights to move, I can do quick movements to set positions. So let's go for far up. There we go, that's on the even lights. Let's just switch back to all, just so we can get a better sense of this. So I can get them all going in one direction, all going in the other direction, which is always fun. And come down to the center like that. I can also, if we want to think about movement, I can select those Sharpies and I can add effects to them. So let's go for position effect, figure of 8, and now they're automatically going to start moving around. Those are our moving lights. That's kind of the basic usage of that. If I clear that, we're going to go back to our default state. And if I come over to my color bars, I can locate my color bars, and there are my color bars. So these, as I said, were pixel mapped and mixed with effects. So let's have a little look at the effects first. So we do this in the same way as we did with the Sharpies. I select the lights that I want. I go to add group effect. Let's go for a color effect. White flicker, I guess, something like that. So I have options here. I can duplicate my elements, include my elements, and include synced elements. So that basically means within each of these lights, there are 12, within each of these fixtures, I should say, there are 12 individual lights, 12 LEDs, 12 sources of light. And this will affect how those lights interact with each other within that fixture. So if I include elements and do that, we can see that now I've got effects going on here. And that works for all of those lights. They all react together, they all work together. But as I said, this isn't necessarily a CamSys tutorial. This is just a demonstration of the rig itself working. However, I do like playing with it. It is fun and pretty distracting. So I'm going to try and keep on task as much as I can. So I essentially pre-programmed a load of stuff into CamSys. So CamSys, we can set up all of these effects, this movement, these intensity effects, and then we can record them into cue stacks here. So these cue stacks are a big list of cues that the lights will cycle through as I give them commands. So if I bring this one up, you can see that I've got intensity effects going on my Sharpies. And then I can click to go to the next cue in the stack, and it'll move the lights, change the gobo, and give me another intensity chase. And then I can skip again, and it'll start moving the lights around. For the demo video, I ran the show as any lighting engineer would. I have my cues programmed and I played along to the song, and that's essentially it. So one of the main ways that I got the lights working in an interesting way in this scene and actually got everything kind of feeling cohesive and working together is through pixel mapping. So these color bars that we have here, if I just bring them back up again. So these color bars that we have here, one of the ways of referring to these lights or these types of fixtures is as a matrix light. So as I was saying previously, within each of these fixtures there are 12 individual lights, and we can think of that as a matrix, almost like the single X or Y plane of a TV. Obviously it's super low resolution because there's only 12 of them and not 1080 in a 1080 vertical dimension. But what we can do is I can map video to each of those individual lights. So if I get rid of all of that again, just clear that, and we come over to my output patch and I go to view plan, you can see a grid here. Now the grid itself represents the video screen, as it were, and each of these little white boxes here, if I view that grid, each of these is the individual lights, so the color, the pixel bars. So we've got our pixel bars on the left-hand side, our pixel bars across the top, and our pixel bars down the right-hand side. And then if I come across to media and I go to pixbar layer 1, and I come to media and I go to the correct media page, sorry, I should have set this up first. So I come over to this media page, you can see a whole array of available media that we can map to those lights. So if I select, say, this one, because I think this one's is quite obvious, and I make the lights full, this is a video file that is playing back on the lights. Like the area of the video file that the lights sit on top of is the area that the lights display. So I brought the music into Max MSP and created an abstract patterned video that I could bring into Unreal and control the lights with, essentially. So I'll show you the Max patch in just a bit, but this is the video file that's playing back. So this is not only the video file that plays on the lights, but it's also projected onto the floor. So if I were to start the sequence now, start the DMX sequence now, we could see that. So that was a brief overview of the lighting control system within this project and the DMX system that I've employed. And as I said earlier, this isn't necessarily a full in-depth tutorial, and there's a lot here that I could continue talking about. But while there isn't a huge amount of knowledge out there at the moment, this is all still relatively new. There are some really good tutorials, but as the game engines progress, and they progress really quickly, things do change, and I had to do a lot of custom work and custom sort of figuring out the code behind the scenes to make the lighting do what I wanted to do. But saying that, there's a really good template that you can use within Unreal, which I did have to stray quite far from to do what I want to do. But it's worth having a little play with if this is something that you're interested in. In terms of learning CamSys, there's tons of information out there, and CamSys themselves have a really, really good in-depth tutorial series on their YouTube channel, so it's definitely worth having a look. So with that in mind, I think it's probably worth spending a bit of time now talking about the audio system and the goals of that audio system. As I said, a big part of this is the idea of spatial sound. I wanted it to sound grounded and as if it was within the space. So with that in mind, the goal was not to create something that was a spectacle, not creating a spatial audio demo with things whizzing around your head or anything like that. The goal was to make it sound like a gig in a venue, rather than a pre-recorded track with a fancy lighting display. So I did a lot of that in Max MSP, which I'll show you after I demo how it sounds. But the idea was to take a stereo mix, as we would do for a normal festival stage, and to make it sound as if it was playing out of two speakers at the front, like a front of house stack in a venue or on a festival stage, and then create delay towers that we kind of get a bit of reverberant sound from and fill out the space a bit more. So how this piece sounds is really dependent on how the character moves around the space, where they're facing, where they're walking. As the character turns, the sound will pan. As the character moves in and out of the venue, there's a fair amount of sonic occlusion that happens and attenuation. So I guess now is as good a time as any to jump into the engine itself and just have a bit of a listen and hear and see what it sounds and looks like. This is a good opportunity to see the lights working in real time inside the game engine. So let's get back over to Unreal. Now I'm going to click play here. And that's going to bring up my window again. So before we start playing, I'm just going to minimize this quickly. I'm going to take away DMX control from CamSys, because as I said, we've recorded that information as DMX keyframes within the project itself so that we don't have to keep manually triggering the lights. And I'm going to click play on this sequence, which starts that DMX and triggers the music to play. So if I fade this up, we have music. And you can see the light show starts to play in the sequence that I recorded. And you can also see my third person character. And one thing that I haven't said yet, because we haven't had the opportunity to watch it yet, is you can see the projection from the video projectors interacting with that character. And this is something that modern game technology really enables, with ray tracing and other stuff that people who are far cleverer than I invented. You can see that the projector properly interacts with the character, whereas previously this would have been a whole process of basically turning the floor into a screen for the video, and it would have been really difficult to make it react with the character. That projector is literally lights with the video file, and it's projecting it as a projector would project it in real life. So you get a certain amount of occlusion from the character's feet and all of that good stuff. It's absolutely amazing. It gets a little bit glitchy, and I think a large part of that is due to recording and doing all of this at the same time. So if you want the full effect, do please watch the sizzle reel. But anyway, we're here for audio, so let's just bring that back up. So the first thing I'm going to do is show you the idea of panning. So this is a first order ambisonic file, which means that it's a 4-channel ambisonic file in AmbiX channel ordering. And really what that means is that it's a file format that Unreal understands and will react to and then decode into binaural. So if I pan this camera around, you should hear the sound pan around with it. Now again, this is quite subtle. The idea was not to create something that's disorientating or, again, whizzing around your head. It was to create naturalism and create the sound of a gig. So the reverb tails and all of that are based around what the sound of the space should sound like, really. So I'm just going to fade this down and restart, because I want to show you what it sounds like when you actually walk around the space as well as pan around the space. So hopefully, I have had some issues with this, but hopefully I should be able to pause this and take it back, send it an empty DMX message so that it stops the music, and then do that. So hopefully that gives you at least a sense of what it sounds like when you're in the room, and the panning and that happens as you kind of move around the space, and the shifts that happen as you get closer and further away to the sources. The idea was to mimic a gig, as I said multiple times. So it is subtle, but we're going for naturalism here. We're not going for madness. We're not going for spectacle in the same way. We're going for naturalism and expected sound profile. So it's mimicking that front of house stack that you would get at a venue or on a festival stage, or those delay towers. And I'll show you the way I spatialized it in just a sec. But where the change is really evident is when you go outside and we start thinking about sonic occlusion, by which I mean disrupting the wavefront with something like a wall should shift that sound, it should change it. A lot of the time we would do that through attenuation. We turn the sound down and then think about stuff like a low pass filter. So if I just hit play and we go back across to here, we should get our sound starting to come through. Yeah. And I'm going to do another little run up onto the stage at the front, just so you can get another sense of what it sounds like in the room, and then I'm going to run outside and you can hear what it sounds like when we go outside. So we're up on the stage right now, and I'm not turning anything down on my mixer. This is the sound reacting to my position. And back into the space. And come outside, where there's nothing modelled. It's not the most exciting place in the world, but it's reacting to the fact that I'm on the other side of a wall. So the sound has changed, it's attenuated because we have sonic occlusion, disrupting that wavefront. I'm going to come back.